how does Pokemon relate to bird photography or wildlife photography in general? Right off the bat, it's almost self-explanatory if you know the side of Pokemon. If you don't, how does it relate to bird photography, wildlife photography, things like that in general? Well, since its creation, the catchphrase is, gotta catch 'em all. So it's fairly self-explanatory how it goes into it, and they're very closely related. You go out into the wild, you go searching through the tall grass, you find creatures that you haven't seen before, you identify them. That's where the similarity stops, because you do not catch them and you do not battle with them. But as many people around my age and older and younger have known for the last 20-something years that Pokemon has been around or longer, it's fun. Good stuff. It really shaped a lot of my childhood, and we're about to go through that. But to get that out of the way right at the beginning, because I think that's only fair, not everyone's going to want to watch this whole video, that's how they're related. That's the question to be answered. On a much longer form, we're going to talk about it. I've talked about Pokemon before. I've talked about how I've been doing a thing with Pokemon and kind of holding off on really giving too many of the details, besides I've been playing through the games again, because I really hadn't considered how it related to what I was doing. That really didn't dawn on me. As obvious as it is, and now looking back at it, it's like, well, yeah. But it never really made the connection between playing Pokemon, getting that early inspiration to collect, to enjoy, to play the game, and then what I'm doing now with going out and looking for birds and identifying them. And all wildlife as a whole, but especially birds, really relates pretty closely to what it is that I'm doing. And yeah, I didn't make that connection until recently. Oh well. It's been fun, and I've been working on something for a really long time that didn't start out the way that it's ending at all. And I thought this would be a good time to really go through all of it, everything that I've been doing, and talk about what I have achieved so far and why it's important to me. We're going to segment this out into a couple different sections. There are chapters on YouTube, at least as of recording this. The platform always changes. But at this point, I'll section it into different things. We're going to talk about the history, my personal history of Pokemon, so why it's kind of important to me. And we're going to talk about the journey that I've made and then what is to come. Let's get started. The history of this all starts when I was a child. In 1996, Pokemon came out. But I don't think we got on it right away. We didn't have many video games growing up. Almost none. And I don't remember exactly when we would have started our introduction to Pokemon. I remember playing one of the games on a Game Boy that my sister got, as I found out, on a trip to Florida at an auction, even though she would have only been 5 years older than me, and I would have been 5 in 1996. So I'm not exactly sure where it starts. I do remember playing Pokemon and kind of hearing about it, but I don't think I ever beat the original cartridge when I was that young. I think I went back and beat them later. This isn't going to work if you're on me the whole time. You know that, right? I did play the second one at a much later point, and we have to kind of jump around between releases. Now we jump to 2002. It's a little bit longer. 2002, I would have been turning 11. In 2002, Ruby and Sapphire released. This is the third Pokemon game, and that's where it really starts. Because although I knew of Pokemon, we watched the show, we watched the movies, we had the cards. I remember going to the bookstore Borders to trade the cards on Pokemon nights. How old I was at that point, I do not know. But I do remember doing that specifically because you got a special card if you made a certain amount of trades or battles with other kids while you're there. And one kid came up to me and was like, if we just trade and trade back, they don't know the difference, and that counts as 2 trades, and we don't lose any of our cards. And I went, well, yeah, of course, this is genius. So we did that so that we would not lose any of ours, but then we got the special whatever it was. So we did that. I do remember that. But anyway, somewhere in 2002, it's probably later, I don't know exactly when it was. I do remember my good friend, when I was taking karate, he gave me, because I did not own a Game Boy, as I mentioned, the only Game Boy that we had as a family was from a previous sibling who just let me borrow it. It was not mine to keep or anything. There was a lot of that. But for the first time, this friend gave me, what birthday was it? I do not remember. But for my birthday, he gave me his old Game Boy Advance because he and his brother had gotten Game Boy Advance SPs and got me a copy of Pokemon Ruby. And I played so much of that. I beat the game, and then that is the only Pokemon Pokedex that's not later in the game been made easier, but that's the only one I've ever fully completed 100%. And that was a challenge. There was a lot to that. I specifically remember, in order to complete it entirely, we had to, this was a different friend who was younger, lived down the street in the same neighborhood. I remember us specifically, in order to completing the Pokedex, we had to catch a Phoebus, which is a fish Pokemon that has an incredibly low spawn rate. So finding one is very rare. And I remember us spending most of a summer, like we did other things, we played other games, but that was still a motivating factor to doing it. That was still something that we did regularly. And I remember us playing it at my house, at his house, and down by the neighborhood pool, because we would also go swimming a lot. And I remember us sitting by the side of the pool when we did not feel like swimming, playing on our Game Boys, trying to find a Phoebus, just fishing over and over and over. And eventually we got it. I don't know how much time that took. I still think even after everything else I've gone through in 20-something years, it's probably right around 20 years. It's 2022, almost 2023. But anyway, that remained, Pokemon Ruby remained one of the only games that I ever completed the Pokedex, and boy, was it worth it. That started so much. For me, that was the first video game I ever owned, and the video game console I had ever owned, that handheld Game Boy Advance. I'm sure I still have it somewhere, but I remember him giving me that, the game. I played so much of it until I bought my own SP, and then I even went further to buying my younger siblings their own Game Boy Advance SPs when I got a job at 13 and I was working in an engineering company. I used my money to buy them Christmas presents where I bought them their own Game Boy Advance SPs. And then I don't think I bought them Pokemon at that time. It gets a little fuzzy in there. I do remember playing Sapphire and Emerald. I played almost as much Emerald as I did Ruby, even though I did not complete the Pokedex in Emerald and I did complete it in Ruby. I wish I still had that. Unfortunately, I have the cartridge, but the game got erased at some point. And I have a theory about what happened there, but no additional proof. No one ever said, oh yeah, I erased it thinking it was my own, or whatever happened. In some way it got erased. I would never have erased that to start over. I would have bought another copy of the game so that I could keep my completed Pokedex. It would have been around that point when I started getting other Pokemon games as well. I do remember trading for a copy of Pokemon Gold through this kid that I knew from the neighborhood pool, who also traded it from someone who actually went to the public school there, as I did not. But I just remember that because I actually have the cartridge with a drawing of the legendary bird on the back of it, which was pretty cool. I certainly was not artistically talented enough to do such a thing, but I was like, well, that's neat. And that's how I got to play through the second one. And the first one, I did go back and play. I don't know if I ever completed it on the original cartridge, but I really enjoyed playing the remake of it a few years later down the road. So I did play a lot of that. Things got a little more complicated after that point. I do remember getting a DS at some point, but I don't remember if I bought it. I must have, because I never got another console given to me. But I did get the game given to me by that same friend who gave me Ruby later on down the road. His parents were teenagers at this point. for a birthday or a Christmas or something like that, gave me Pearl, the 4th generation. And I do remember playing that because I remember specifically playing some of it and doing the little touchscreen mini game where you tap to mine in the wall. I remember enjoying that, but I never beat that one. And by my standards, beating the game is getting through all of the badges and the Elite Four or whatever that game's version of it is, which for the most part, at least up until that point and further on for a good bit, was the Elite Four. That is what I consider to be beating a Pokemon game. Completing the Pokedex is something that takes hundreds of hours, and again, I only ever really did it on that first one. But we had the 4th generation, and then the 5th and the sequel to the 5th were Black and White and Black and White 2. And I got those at some point as well. It's a little muddy because I do not remember exactly when I did those, because I never beat them either. And as a matter of fact, as part of this journey that we're going to go into talking about now as an adult, I didn't get very far. I went back to my original cartridge and booted up the game, and I had like 2 badges, and that was it. So something distracted me to the point where I was no longer playing them. Let's see, I only got the original Black and White in 2010. Well, this is why. 2010, I am now born in 91. I'm 19 years old and an adult, working a minimum wage job, and have no money for most video games. So I don't think I got them originally. I think I got them used later on, or maybe someone gave it to me as a gift. I don't exactly remember those because I did not beat them all the way through. They're not nearly as memorable. That just is what it is. The year is now 2013. I am 22 years old, and in the summer, when I turned 22, I also started dating my significant other, Bonnie, still to this day. And she goes back to college in the fall. We have a long-distance relationship for a lot of it, but we both enjoyed games, and we both liked the Pokemon before, but also had a very similar experience of liking it early on and then dropping off on the later ones. But now, the 6th generation of Pokemon games is coming out in November of 2013. We pre-ordered them. We were that excited. We were like, yes, we're going all back in on this. And as a matter of fact, we got new consoles. We each got a 3DS console, the special edition that came with the games that had the designs of the 2 legendary Pokemon on them. I had played all the way through that. That was a regular thing. We would talk about it. We would go together and play. We went and got it at the GameStop where she was going to college. So I traveled. I was going most weekends to see her because she was at college and had things that could not leave. For the most part, during that time period, I was traveling to her. That would change later on, but that's not really part of this story. The point is, we definitely went. I remember going and picking them up, and then she had a thing that she had to do for college, and so I, like an adult, sat and went with and played Pokemon the whole time, and really enjoyed it. And that really revitalized where I was like, yes, this is great. I really enjoyed playing Pokemon. And there were so many at this point. So many. Hold on. Assuming what I just found is right, doing a very quick Google search, by the 6th generation of Pokemon, there are over 700. So there were a large amount that you could get in that game. I remember playing through it. I remember beating it. And I do remember going back because I got, I could trade for Pokemon. They had the over the internet global trade system where you could put in, I'm assuming, it's been a long time since I've done it, but I'm pretty sure you could put in and go, here, I want this one and I have this one. Or there was just a random luck, put in something, get something else back. And I remember doing that for a long time, trying to complete the Pokedex. Never happened. But that was where I got a large amount at that point, doing a lot of trading. And just all back in on Pokemon. Fantastic. Now the 7th generation comes out a few years later. And again, we wind up getting it as a couple. Each one of us. This became the partnership. You get one, I get one. We play them together. If we get far enough along. I actually don't know if my mic is picking any of this up. This is a really awkward position. 2014. A new remake comes out. And you would think, given my past experience, I'd be playing the crap out of it. I really didn't. Looking back at the cartridges later on, I didn't play that much of it. I don't remember exactly how far I got. It was a couple of badges in, but I just fell off of it again. At this point, I'm playing Xbox with friends. We're playing more games more regularly. It's not like I'm starved for it, and moving through things and not really finishing them was a theme for most of my adult life. So I'm not entirely surprised. We did go in again on the 7th generation, Sun and Moon, but I didn't expect that. I remember specifically going, new Pokemon, that sounds cool. Bonnie and I really like Pokemon. We could go in. It wasn't going to happen. I was broke. Oh, come on. Don't tell me you're overheating. The following year, in 2014, a remake came out that you would just expect based on it before I guess I fell off. Maybe because it was a remake of something that I played so very much of. Maybe because it wasn't until a few years later in 2016 when the next generation of Pokemon is coming out. The 7th generation, Pokemon Sun and Moon. That I kind of fell off on as well, but I didn't even expect to get it. It was like, yeah, this would be cool. Pokemon, would love to get that. I couldn't afford it at the time. There was a surprise of just, look, we both get Pokemon. And Bonnie got it for us. And I remember playing it and enjoying it. It was cool. They had the Hawaiian themes in that one. But I didn't beat it. I have a very specific memory of us going to eat at a Chili's, and there was a wait. And so we're sitting outside, and I'm playing Pokemon. And I was playing through Pokemon Sun and Moon. But really, the problem was that back in 2013, that 3DS that we'd gotten, it was older at this point. They'd come out with newer ones. And boy, the multi-battles where you would go up against 5 or 6 Pokemon and there's all the animations, it really chugged. And that made me not enjoy playing it as much because it would just make already a long battle even longer. I wasn't a fan of that. And so I remember dropping off specifically at that point. But it wasn't too much longer. I went back within a few years and I went back and beat that one at that point as well. I don't remember exactly when that was, but I did do that. What were you crying about? A few years later, actually, let's go back. Let's do this part over again. Because there is something at that point. An important detail that I realized because I didn't have it written down in my list of games that I played and when I played through them. In 2016, in the summer of 2016, that's when we got really into Pokemon because Pokemon Go came out. And that swept the world and myself and my friend group. And we were going out every day after work to play Pokemon. We were exploring and finding new places. We were visiting places we'd never been before. I went to downtown Atlanta because I lived in Georgia, and I'd only been to downtown Atlanta like 2 or 3 times. I'm not a fan of driving downtown or anything, but I got on a MARTA bus with my friend who went to Atlanta often, my roommate and friend at that point, and we went together. And so we went downtown to just play Pokemon. And we went all over the place, and we went walking. I walked more that summer than most of my life up until that point because of Pokemon. It was just awesome at that point. And it has dropped off significantly. I still play it every once in a while. But at that time, like most of the rest of the world, we were all back in on Pokemon. We were driving places, we were exploring, we were finding parks, and I was making new friends just because of that to play Pokemon. So probably that may have had something to do with why, when Sun and Moon came out in November, played it, liked it, tried it. It was now winter at this point. It wasn't as much, but it didn't, I mean, we still played Pokemon Go in spurts, a couple of months where we wouldn't think about it, and then it was all we did. And I do remember where it was like, I've been walking all day, and we're tired, but we're not done yet, and we need to go hit these stops and, do this stuff. And we just got in the car, and I think We took turns. Different people would drive depending on whose turn it was, I guess, at that point. And whoever was driving just handed their phone off to the next person, and we just went slow. There were other people doing this. There was a little like mini downtown area for a small. It was like an old shoppy type thing, where it's spelled with the E because it's all vintage old shops is the look that they're going for in a small downtown area. And so we went there. And there were other cars that would just make a loop around this little park and then down the street and then up and then over by the fire department. You turn around in that parking lot and you come back and you go. And you hit like 5 or 6 stops in that area. And you're going slow enough because already you have to go slow for this area. It's very small and congested. And now these people are just doing that and playing Pokemon. I'm sure to the annoyance of others around. But this was the global event of summer of 2016 in Pokemon Go. And yeah, we played a lot of it. Then a few years later, and Pokemon Let's Go has come out, which took a lot of aspects and, kind of tried to capitalize on that huge global event that was Pokemon Go. And they kind of combined a lot of elements. It was for the Switch at this point, right? We already had a Switch to play Breath of the Wild whenever that came out. That was fantastic. Bonnie and I were sharing a Switch at this point. And eventually later on in 2019 or 2020, I want to say, she would get her own and then we each had our own console. But for a fashion there, we were sharing one. And I do remember getting Let's Go, not even planning on it. I'd heard it was coming out and it was like, okay, a remake, that's interesting. Oh, it's going to have more like Go mechanics. It's fine with Go, but I don't know how I feel about that kind of going into the main series of games, the way that they're kind of mixing it. It worked out great, don't get me wrong. Looking back on it now, I understand why there was hesitancy because it was different, but at the time, not knowing what it was like, understandably, you're a little bit, but it worked out beautifully. I wasn't planning on buying this at all, and the only reason that I did wind up getting it was because I looked on the Switch and I saw my friend from back who gave me Pokemon Ruby, and then our other friend that we wound up doing pretty much everything with, both of them had it, and it was like, well, all right, cool. So I just went ahead and bought it digitally, joined in with the two of them, and I remember playing that and beating that, and actually completing the Pokedex because that was doable in the one game. I did not own both of them, but you could transfer from Pokemon Go. And this is important because the act of transferring from other games, I was never really doing that. We had Game Boys when I was a teenager, and my siblings and I played through the link cable, but we didn't do a whole lot of trading. There was some back when we were doing when we were completing the 3rd gen Pokedex. Yes, we did have to trade a few things from Ruby to Sapphire and whatnot. But trading for yourself, between my games of the work I'd already put in on Pokemon Go, catching those, transferring a couple that you can only get, the exclusives between the versions, because we only owned one Switch, we only owned one type, and both of my friends bought the same type. We all got Eevee. None of us had Let's Go Pikachu. So none of us could get the exclusives from that game. Thankfully, worked out. I had access to that because I had caught those missing ones already in Pokemon Go on my phone. So that worked out, and I completed the Pokedex there. That was made a lot easier, and the fact that I was able to transfer them in is why I don't really count that as completing a Pokedex. It was just made a lot easier. It's the same reason why all of the shinies that I caught in Pokemon Go and Pokemon Let's Go, I also don't really count those as catching a shiny because they were just literally made to be easier. There was a mechanic that made it easier to catch. It was not the original rate, which was much harder. At this point, I'd never even caught one or anything that had been shiny in what I consider to be, I guess, a true nature or something. Boy, you've gotten cat hair all over me. The next generation of Pokemon that I would play would be Pokemon Sword and Shield. Again, Bonnie and I very much went, oh yeah, Pokemon on the Switch, and it's an old style, it's not made with the Let's Go mechanics. It's more traditional of what we're used to. Yes, I think I do want to do that. Because really, for a lot of it, I like playing games on the TV more than I wind up playing them handheld, which is very interesting because I started with handheld things. That's how I played a lot of them. Legend of Zelda, a completely other different series. I've almost not, until the more modern things, played any of the console games back in the day. I didn't play Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask or any of those. I owned Twilight Princess, but I didn't get very far into that. But I did play the handheld ones. I played Link to the Past because that had been re-released. We played so much Four Swords because that was what we were playing with the Link cable that I mentioned before. But anyway, this is about Pokemon, not Legend of Zelda. So playing a game on the TV sounded fantastic. And I could have done that with Let's Go, but here's the problem in Pokemon Let's Go on the Switch. You have to throw the ball. It is not just a press button mechanic, unless you're playing it handheld, in which case you just have to aim the entire Switch console, which was so much easier to do. So that's how I played it. My friends were playing it on the TV and complaining about having the way that they were doing it. And it was like, it's not even worth it. Just play it handheld. Consider it a handheld game on the Switch. Trust me. Is what I did. But anyway, Pokemon Sword Shield came out. We pre-ordered that one as well. Got it day one. Started playing it together. Fantastic. Great game. Really enjoyed that one as well. But not my favorite of all of them if I had to go back. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I liked the new things that they brought to it. There's a lot of quality of life things that when you go back and play the older ones, you really appreciate that the newer ones have. But it didn't scratch the itch so much as what would come, I suppose. But I did enjoy playing Pokemon Sword. And then Pokemon Shield I borrowed later on. At this point, we are into 2020. And at that point, if you've been following much of what I've been doing outside of Pokemon entirely, I've been starting in wildlife photography the last few years. And in 2020 is when I bought a video-specific camera, and I went out and made some videos. And that launches into the whole other thing. And what really spawned from this stuff is that I started using, in 2021, after moving to Wyoming, I was editing. And editing is a very long and drawn-out process with a lot of what I was doing. Specifically, I remember doing stabilizing footage, and that's pretty much where you just set it, and you set some settings, and then you just kind of sit and you wait. And it's just long enough where you wait for a couple of minutes at a time. It's not long enough where you can really walk away and go do something else, because it could end very soon. It depends on how long the clip is, and other things, video editing, but it was enough where I was like, boy, this is boring. I need something to do. And I picked up Pokemon Shield, which I'd played through Sword, so I borrowed Bonnie's copy to play through Shield on my own Switch. And I remember this specifically because I made the character and I named it Cache Render, Cache, C-A-C-H-E, because that is a term for video editing, and rendering is basically what I was doing. And I wound up playing that. I didn't get very far, but it was just something to do because it was turn-based, so I can very simply just set it up, start recording, and then start recording. That's not the right word to use at all. I can start rendering, and I can play the game, and I can go back and forth between them. And that was an easy, it was keeping me going and something like that. So I was already back in playing Pokemon games mindset while trying to get through a boring process that I did not enjoy, which is most editing. And that kind of wraps up the whole history of what happened before. So let's start with that note of editing and playing Pokemon again, a game that I'd already played, to get through something that I found boring. And let's transition into the next section, which is talking about what I have been doing since March of 2021. In March of 2021, I started something that I have just completed in October of 2022. A little bit of the backstory there, as we just talked about, you know how I enjoyed playing Pokemon. I did not play through all of the games, but I owned most of them at this point. And I was getting bored doing something, editing. But I was also bored doing something else, and that was riding an exercise bike. In January of 2021, I bought an exercise bike because I needed the exercise. I was working on losing some weight, but mostly it was trying to build stamina so that I could go long places. I could go long distances. I could be walking, but for the wildlife side of it. I was trying to build up that base, just stamina is a good word for it. Why did you do that? In January of 2021, I bought an exercise bike. over the last few years since I'd started taking a camera and going outside with it, my main goal was to build up the stamina to go long distances, to be able to take my camera equipment and go places without becoming winded. I was incredibly out of shape. The bike helped with that. That was something I was looking into was, well, even if it's cold, even if it's snowing, I can still go out, I can still get an exercise in somehow. And that's why I bought an exercise bike. And I learned my limits, and I learned what I could and couldn't do on it. And I started by watching videos and just listening to music. The very first day I tried it, I put on like a VR headset almost, but it was just with the phone in there, one of those cheaper ones, and tried watching 360 videos of other people biking, and that didn't work because of multiple reasons. One, it was disorienting, and two, when I'm trying to go a certain speed, if they're not going that, it's even more disorienting. So that didn't work either. I needed something else to keep me focused, keep me going, because I still don't, to this day, enjoy exercising. Even though I do it regularly, I don't enjoy it. I never have. It's not a fun thing. I don't get that runner's high or that enjoyment that comes from it or the reason to keep going. It's not there at all. I've never liked it, but I have that pattern down now. I ride the bike multiple days a week and also lift weights, but that's a separate thing. That's to build the strength to carry all of the camera equipment that I needed. But at this point in time, it was simply just, I need something to keep me going on there. And I thought, well, all right, here's a goal I could do. I'm interested. I like Pokemon. I've got the handheld, the console. I could start playing Pokemon games while I'm riding on the bike. And so in March of 2021, I made a goal where I went, well, let's see how long this takes me. I'll start writing down and tracking a bit and playing Pokemon games and beat the Elite Four in each one of them as I play through the games, as I ride the bike. I started with Pokemon Let's Go because I was also not wanting to try to go back too far, so I don't have an original copy of the original games. The second half of this, as you may notice, as we talk more about it, is that I did not want to spend any money. My money was going towards camera things or trying to stay alive. Did not have much extra for video games for something that I may just give up, like I'd done in the past. Just start something and not finish. Definitely a possibility. But it kept me going on the bike, and it kept me playing. So I started with Pokemon Let's Go, and I dropped off at one point because I just wrote it down and went, here's my goal. At some point, I want to beat all the Pokemon games because I've missed several of them. I never went back through them. What are you doing? So I didn't start tracking them on a regular basis or writing the dates that I started or how long it took me or anything like that. But I started with Pokemon Let's Go. That was a good one to do on the bike. That worked. It wasn't great because you're pedaling and then you're trying to aim the camera to throw the Pokeball. So it didn't work out exactly perfectly, but it worked enough. And I took a break at some point. I did not complete it until much later in 2021. But I did get to a point where I went, oh, I'll just move on. I'm close enough, even though I never finished it. And so I started playing through the remake for Soul Silver. I'm pretty sure it wasn't Heart Gold. I'm pretty sure it was Soul Silver. And I played that. But then during the summer, I started walking more. I went out because it was nice, and I went to the park, and I that was my exercise. So I did that multiple times a week. So it took me a lot longer to beat that. And that was when I started tracking things. A part of this goal was not just to play through the games, but to also transfer one Pokemon up through all of them. So then I could play through Sword and Shield with this team that I had assembled throughout all the games. I looked up at some point how you could transfer them through, what it took, how far back you could go, which is another reason why I didn't start with original cartridges. I was trying to play the newest. I didn't mind if I was playing a remake of a game. Just playing through each generation of game was good enough for me at that point. So, Pokemon Soul Silver. I do not have dates for when I started this. I'm pretty sure I was playing it during the summer, but I do have dates for when I got done with the end of it. I finished it in November 18th, 2021. And I've been writing notes as I go through that stuff. I'm not going to go through all of them because that's like 10 games worth of things where I went, oh, this is interesting. But for the point, I wanted to catch a Scyther because I really liked Scizor. That was the main one to take away from this one. And that's where I started. And I got him, and I went through the game and I played through that stuff. I don't know exactly when I wrote down and started this stuff, but I played through. In November, I completed Soul Silver, and I put 43 hours and 43 minutes into it. That's how long it took. That was one of the things that I documented. Shortly after that, I went back because I went, oh, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write down when I start. I'm going to write down when I finish. I'm going to document on a regular basis of kind of what's going on, what I'm doing in the games. And so I went back in the end of December and that doesn't line up. I started the 3rd generation in November, right after finishing Gen 2. At this point, I had not gone back to do 1. I don't know why. But I did need to go back and do that, and I finally did. I completed the 1st generation of Let's Go with a time of 26 hours and 43 minutes to beat through that game, and I did that at the end of December. But in November, I moved over to Omega Ruby, and that's when I started documenting as I was going through. And I played through the game. I beat the game just before I went back, just before Christmas, December 22nd of 2021. I beat Gen 3. The time is weird there because I didn't actually... There was more to do than beating in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. There was more to do than just beating the Elite Four. They had a whole prologue. So I went back and I did that as well. I did those extra things that were necessary there. And then there was like legendary catching. At the end, I just wrote down like 45-ish hours. So I completed that. That brings me up to where I took a Christmas break. I went back over the end of that break and I finished the 1st generation. By this point, a new game has come out, a remake of the 4th gen that has already come out a good bit before this, and Bonnie's played through most of it. I don't think she finished it, but I hadn't even touched it. It was a brand new Pokemon game sitting unopened, waiting for me to get to this point because I started a goal loftily thinking, oh, I'll get to this point by then, and I wasn't. So January 4th, I start the 4th generation of Pokemon. The remakes of Diamond and Pearl on the Switch. These were fun. They were different. They had different art style. I get what they were going for with kind of a chibi looking, trying to emulate the original. That was a fun time. I did play through that. I enjoyed that. That took about, I have to get my notes here, 24 hours and 42 minutes to play through. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond is the one that I was playing through. I had Pearl originally, although I didn't beat it, as we've talked about. Started that on January 4th. Finished it on February 10th. It took about a month. Again, I'm really only playing when I'm riding the bike, which at this point in time was about 4 days a week. I would get done with my work, go get on the bike, ride for 45 minutes, about 8 miles, and play Pokemon the entire time. That's when I'm playing Pokemon, that's when I'm progressing. So finishing that one, moving on to the 5th generation of Pokemon. It was within the 5th generation of Pokemon that I started to get a little bit frustrated and think, maybe this isn't worth it. Pokemon White, played on the DS. And a thing to mention at this point, I did kind of start this as an excuse to rebuild a 3DS that had broken during the move from Georgia to Wyoming. The screen got all cracked, so I replaced the screen on that. It was kind of like, oh, well, if I do this, now I have to get my money's worth out of fixing this DS that otherwise would not be getting touched. So that was why. And I did play some of them on the DS and some of them on the Switch, depending on which ones it was. Going back, Pokemon White, my original game, my original cartridge. So I played through that. We started that one February 11th. It took me 32 hours and 21 minutes. And I finished it on April 14th. I didn't like 5 as much. I had trouble with it. It got a lot more difficult and frustrating, and I wasn't prepared for that. This was meant to be a casual thing. It's Pokemon. And that's really when, and if you go back to that time period, I'm pretty sure I started talking about it in videos that I was making when I was going out and doing the personal vlogs, where I went, here's a thing that's interesting. Pokemon games are great when you play them a couple of years apart, but when you play them back to back, they get boring. It's the same thing over and over. But I played through that one. And then I started the second generation. I did not need to do this, but I owned it and I figured, why not if I'm going to? I played through Pokemon Black 2 because I own that cartridge as well. That one started on April 19th, 22. And it took me 36 hours and 55 minutes to beat. Not that far off from the first one. Finished it. Looking through my notes here, May 20th of 22 is when I finished Pokemon Black 2. Again, not my favorite in those ones there, but it was fine. I realized I haven't been mentioning which ones I've been taking up through this thing, but I'm going to put it on the screen because as one of the ways to document this, I was either taking pictures of the 3DS or screenshots on the Switch every time I beat each game and the team that I took with me to go through it. I wasn't trying to do anything specific. I was just like, these are Pokemon that I like, and this is what I'm going to use. But that puts us through to, we are in the back half now, Gen 6. Pokemon X, May 20th, 22. Obviously, I still had more on the bike ride that day because I finished one and went straight into the next one at the same time period. After 23 hours and 58 minutes, much shorter than the other two games, I finished Pokemon X on June 8th. It had gotten much easier at that point. I remember enjoying it again because I'd played through it like I talked about once before. This was a great idea to try to change up each one of the shots, let me tell you. I'm not straining at all. So I got done with that one, transferred up. What did I take in Pokemon X? Sylveon. Sylveon was my Pokemon that I transferred up through to the newest generation. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I played through X. I got Y originally, played through X, fun times, and then moved on. The second one started on June 9th. Pokemon Moon took me 30 hours and 39 minutes. Starting it on June, as I said, June 9th, completing it on June 23rd? 23rd, yes. Okay. June 23rd of 22, Pokemon Shield. This is where I started over and subsequently created a new account to play through because I'd already started one on when I was talking about editing and making that character. June 23rd, I started playing Pokemon Shield. Finished it on July 1st of 22. Took me 26 hours and 52 minutes. I enjoyed Shield again, this time through. But more importantly, what was the next one? The next Pokemon game that I would be playing would be Pokemon Arceus. Pokemon Legends Arceus. Oh, hands down, favorite Pokemon game to date. Now, hopefully this new one will have a lot of the same elements. But on July 3rd, 22, I started Pokemon Arceus. And immediately within playing it, this was one where I stopped playing it so much on the exercise bike, and I just sat down and played it in front of the TV, and it didn't take me very long. As you'll see, it took me 25 hours and 36 minutes, and I finished it on July 10th. So 1 week. That became what I played on the weekends. That became what I played all the time. That was the main game, my main focus, and I really enjoyed it. And to be fair, I was also moving at this point. I was getting ready to move. If you go back to any videos during this time period, I was very stressed trying to do this, and this was a fantastic game to play during that time. Really enjoyed the games that they made. I remember immediately after starting it, going and texting one of my siblings and going, hey, play this game. Just trust me, play this game. It is like if they didn't have 20 years of Pokemon games leading up to it, that they had to follow the same pattern. It's like if they just made a brand new Pokemon game and it just came out in 2022 without any need of the other stuff. They redid so much of it. I really enjoyed that. Fantastic time. As I mentioned, I was now playing through Arceus on the TV as part of my main game. I would play it when I was done working out. I would play it when I was just sitting in between work and then dinner. I would play it on the weekends. I was playing it in my free time, in my gaming time specifically. Which meant that I wasn't playing it while I was riding the exercise bike. So what was I playing? I went back to Pokemon Shield and bought the DLC, Sword, and bought the DLC that I'd never played through before and started playing through that, which was only a little disappointing considering how much it costs and considering how short it was. Like both of them together, really, but it was fine. It was Pokemon. Can't complain too much. I enjoyed the time that I spent with that. I started that on July 6th. I went back through that. And then I got through with the story of Pokemon Sword's DLC on August 6th of 22. At this point, I had moved. I was now in Colorado. That's not really relevant to much except for the fact that I had moved at that point. But I went through that stuff. And at this time, somewhere around in this point, I don't have an exact date of when. Oh, yes, I do. August 6th. I did write down a date. After about 50 hours with the DLC and then the original time I spent playing Pokemon Shield, so it's not a true accurate count of how long it takes to do it, but on August 6th, I finished the DLC and I went, all right, new goal. Because at this point, I had just been playing through the games and taking one Pokemon with me each time to transfer up through. But I still had to buy the subscription to Pokemon Bank on the 3DS and Pokemon Home on the Switch, because those are paid subscriptions in order to transfer all your Pokemon up. But I got all the way through done with that, and I went, all right, let's see where I'm at. After playing through all these games, and my only focus is beat the Elite Four and transfer one Pokemon up. I thought, oh, complete the Pokedex. Obviously, that's a great idea. I should try and do that. I like collecting. I like doing that. But that's a lot of Pokemon. It's like 900 Pokemon. I don't really want to do that. That's too much of a goal for me to set on myself when I started. And then sometime clearly in August, I went, never mind, let's see where I'm at. So I went ahead and I started a new goal, which was to complete the Pokedex, to get everything. Not to do, keep in mind, I know that there are people who have done it. I know that there are different ways of collecting. There is a living dex where you collect one of each and every type. And then there are ones who just go through, and this is what I did, to just try to collect all of them in some way, shape, or form in that way, and to try to get, for me, it was looking at the Pokedex collection in Pokemon Home and trying to get as close as I could to complete. That's where it started on August 6th. And the reason it started is because I was not that far off. After counting everything up, and I started looking through the stuff, I'm sorry, I'm a little out of order here. I did decide to do this, but I did not know exactly how many it was until after I went through on August 6th, I began catching legendaries from the Dynamax adventures in the Sword DLC. I do not like Dynamax adventures. I could not find anyone to play with online. That's the, for anyone who does not know, who hasn't done it, it's where you go and you battle. You and 3 people make a team of 4 lower level and not fully evolved Pokemon, so you're already at a disadvantage going up against something that is more powerful, and you have to get through 4 battles in a row to get to the legendary, or 3 in a row to get to the legendary, and that makes a 4th one? I don't remember. I don't like it, but you have to go through that. You can't stop and heal. You can, along your path, you choose different ones to try to get. You don't get to bring in anything with you. It's completely randomized. I get it's meant to be difficult, but it is unfairly difficult when you're trying to play with the AI, who does not play well. They pick ones that are weak. They don't use moves that are effective. It's frustrating. I did not enjoy this time. I just wanted to get through it by this point. I wanted to be done with it. And I did as much as I could. I looked up however many there were. I went through as much as I could. And I caught all the ones that I was missing. At this point, my goal was to complete the Pokedex as much as I could. So then my goal became to complete the Pokedex as much as I could. And so I checked, I transferred everything over, and on August 19th of 2022, almost about 2 full months ago from when I'm recording this now, I did a full accounting after checking that there was nothing left that I could get in Dynamax Adventures on Pokemon Sword. There was still some that I needed from Shield, and I was not looking forward to that and really hoping I wouldn't have to do that, but I only had 111 left to go for a full Pokedex. As luck would have it, that very weekend when I decided, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get out the 3DS again. I'm going to go back to my cartridges. I'm going to try to get everything. I'm going to go back. I'm going to make a list of what I'm missing. I'm going to find out how to get it. I'm going to try to transfer everything up through into the Pokemon Home to try to complete it. That weekend, there was an event going on which allowed me to get one of the event-exclusive Pokemon that will come up again later, just by using a code on Pokemon Sword and being able to just collect that way, which was super useful. So August 19th starts, and I start going through and I'm looking, and my goal is not to make a huge thing out of this. I don't want to make it a forever ongoing thing. If there's an easy way to do it, I'm going to try. If there's a way for me to get a Pokemon without having to trade for it, because that seems a little too easy, I'm going to do that. Because I don't want it to take forever. I want to be done at some point. I've been doing it at this point, and this is all while I'm riding the bike again at this point. And so I start going through, and I start making a list, and I go back through. At this point, I started in Pokemon Sword, it looks like. And I started going through and catching all the ones that I could. And I was transferring from what I already had. If I was missing, there was a lot that I was missing the second evolution of, which makes sense. I would have gotten the first in Pokemon Go, or maybe if I replayed or something like that. And then the third from when I would have played it originally and actually leveled them up. And I was missing the second evolution to actually transfer into to count for the Pokedex. So I wound up doing an awful lot of that throughout August and into September. I got all the way down to, I went through the DLC in Sword to catch all of the ones there. I started getting everything there. September 2nd, 22, Yamask was really convoluted to evolve. That was one where you had to catch it, take it, let it get a certain amount of damage without fainting, without healing it, without like all of these different things, and then take it to a certain location at a certain type of weather, maybe? That might not be part of it. But anyway, it was really convoluted. I wrote in capital letters here, convoluted. I evolved this one. So I went all the way through. I started... I traded in from Pokemon Home on some of them, rather than having to start, especially all of the... It was Gen 5, because I never beat that one, right? I had to go back to that one. I never played with anyone else during that time period either. So I went back and I got that, and I played through... when I played through it again, I just picked whatever Pokemon. My goal at the time was not to complete the Pokedex, so I did not pick one of the starters that I did not have. So I had to go back and get the second evolution of every one of the starters and then some of the other ones. I wasn't about to start the whole game over, because you have to beat to get a starter Pokemon, it's the start of the game. You have to go all the way back to the beginning. I'd have to start a new one on my cartridge and delete my save and start over, and then beat the whole game again with that other one, and do that 3 or 4 times to get all these different, at least 3 times to get the different starter Pokemon. I just traded for those. I was not interested in doing that. That within itself would be another 24 or 25 hours for each one of those Pokemon. I'd still be doing it to this day. I don't know. No, I just traded for those. Then I was still in Sword at that point. I just decided to trade for all of that stuff. I think the last thing I did in Sword was to evolve a Farfetch'd, which was really annoying in the post-game because you had to use it and get 3 critical hits in one battle without it fainting. And that was really difficult when you get to the end of the game and the only things that are left are really high-level Pokemon. So I just traded for that one as well. Then I moved on to Pokemon Diamond. I moved on to Pokemon Diamond, which, again, on the Switch, I was playing through that one. I went back through that one on my goal to complete the Pokedex. I had to complete the Pokedex within that game, so I just transferred everything that I was missing because otherwise it wouldn't have unlocked certain areas that I needed to go to in order to get specific Pokemon and evolve them to complete the collection. So I traded in 5 or 6 there to get that stuff. I went back through and finished Pokemon Diamond. I had about 40 to go at this point, and I moved back into Pokemon White. This was a little waste of time. I could have just done it in the second one, but I was missing a couple there that I had to go through. That was really frustrating because I kind of hurt myself in those. I did not expect to complete the Pokedex. So when I was done with just going through the game and I was transfer everything up, I just left one single random level 3 whatever in there, which meant that when I went back to the game, that's all I had. So I had to catch Pokemon, train them up, go through. It was very frustrating. It took a long time to get through all of that stuff, just grinding in order to go get the one that I needed to then level that one up to transfer it up through. It was annoying. And I could have done all of it in Black 2, and I didn't think about it until I moved on to Black 2 to get ones that were specific there that were easier to get in other ones. I was trying this entire time to catch. One of the ones that took a while was a Tynamo. It's a little fish thing that only spawns. I originally was like, oh, I can just get it in Ruby. That'll be easier, Omega Ruby. But that was annoying because it's a random event that happens once a day. And you can only go get it if you find the random event that is a cave is where it'll spawn. I checked it every day for 5 days and didn't get it and went, never mind, I'm done. Let's see where else I can get it. So I went back to Black 2 and got it there. We are now at the end of September, and I have moved on to Pokemon X and Y to get about 5 that I was missing there. X and Y didn't take very long. Just got the ones that I was missing. It was nothing special. It was just ones that I had missed here and there. Evolved them. It took almost no time. It was, I started on the 29th, and I moved on to Pokemon Moon on the 2nd of October. So it took like 3 days. And that was even a little bit on the weekend where I was like, nah, I'm bored. Let me just grab Pokemon and go to it. Then I moved on to Pokemon Moon again. There was a point that took me back there while going through Moon. There's a fish Pokemon called Baruxish. I don't know how to pronounce most of these names. I haven't watched the show in 2 decades, so I've never heard them pronounced by anyone. But anyway, there's a fish Pokemon that only spawns in one spot and has like a 1% spawn rate. Once I learned that, I knew what I was in for again, because all of a sudden I'm back at the age of 12 or 13 by the pool just fishing with my friend over and over, and both of us with our Game Boys fishing. This was done on a Sunday. I started it early in the morning. I remember being out here on the couch, trying to play there, and then moving back and taking a nap because I was just so bored and doing that. I just decided, look, however long this takes, let's just try to get through this today, because I don't want to spend even more time doing this. For the most part, I was doing this while I was riding the exercise bike, but on a couple weekends, as I'm getting more determined, I'm down to only 30 left when I start Pokemon Moon. This seems almost achievable, and I'm not actually going to get all 30 because so many of them are event exclusives that we'll get to in a minute. So I did that. It was probably in total 4 or 5 hours just fishing over and over and over to catch that one, but I finally found one and I caught it. So ready to be done with it at that point. Took a little bit longer, finished up that stuff, and moved back into Pokemon Arceus on the 4th of October. Arceus took a little bit longer. I had to go in. I was missing quite a few, just straight up missing that I didn't have, like the exclusives that came from Arceus. Specifically the mount Pokemon that you can get. I didn't have any of those because I did not evolve any of those. There were many that I was missing. So I started out with, let's go catch those, and then let's see, specifically to get Arceus, one of the ones I would need, I would have to complete the Pokedex in that game. And here it is at the beginning of October, and I thought, okay, I've got some time. Here is now my goal at this point, what I'm thinking at the beginning of October. I want to get done with this. I'm riding the bike, I'm doing that stuff. I'll play on weekends sometimes, depending on what it is, because I am determined to be done before the new release. And there is a new Pokemon game, Scarlet and Violet, that similar to the past, Bonnie and I have already pre-ordered, and we will be getting and we will be playing, and it's finally what we really want is multiplayer with the improvements from Arceus. So we're going to be able to actually play a Pokemon game together for the first time, at not just playing at the same time, but actually in the game together, and that's really exciting. So I wanted to be totally done with this entire goal that I set up, this journey, since March of 2021. I wanted to be done before then. And I thought, well, it's been such an ongoing thing. I have mentioned it in multiple other videos. I should make a video talking just about all of this, what you're watching right now. I decided that this would be a good thing to do, to document, to really share what it is I've been doing since March of 2021, and to keep me going throughout this entire thing. We are currently, I mean, like I said, for the majority, I was riding the exercise bike. At this point in time, I have ridden over 2,600 miles on the exercise bike. That is a lot. That is further than the distance that we traveled when we moved across the country entirely. And yeah, it's just a habit at this point. I've gotten in better shape. I don't get winded when I go out quite as much anymore, unless I'm going uphill. But there's been a significant improvement, and I'm really glad that I did it for the exercise reasons and to complete this goal. This has been something that I've been working on for such a long time, and it is. It's now 4 to 5 days a week, depending on how I feel on a Monday. Like today, when I'm recording this, I might go ride the bike at some point today, and I'll do 45 minutes of it. And I am, not to spoil anything, but I'm done with the Pokemon stuff. That's why I'm recording this today. I finished my Pokemon stuff on Saturday. I am officially done until this new game comes out, and then I'll collect all the new ones from that one. But I have gone as far as I can. And a little worried about what I'm going to play next when I'm doing that, but I'm not too worried. Honestly, going back, one of the games that I also played on Game Boy was the Mega Man Battle Network games, with the chips and I really enjoyed those, and I was really excited to hear that they announced they were doing a collection for the Switch, but that's not out until next year, so I'm going to find something else to play. But anyway, I'm in Arceus at this point. It's the beginning of October. I'm playing. I'm getting that stuff done. The 4th of October, I started in. I had to catch that stuff. It took me about a day each to do each one, about 45 minutes at a time, because they have certain... They have certain requirements. First of all, I have to get the specific versions in the game, which can be frustrating, and then go through the different ones, their requirements in order to level them up. But I get through that stuff, and I get stuck on fighting the very end to try to unlock some of the legendaries that I'm missing. I get stuck fighting that Giratina fight, because you have to beat a guy who's got 6 Pokemon and his stuff is tough, and then you have to go into the fight and you have to do both forms of this legendary all without a break. Like, it's all one thing. And that really kicked my butt the first time. But I made it all the way through eventually. I went back and did that. I went and did some other stuff first to take a break from it, to try to level up what I had. I transferred in some of my strongest stuff so that I could try to beat that, and I still didn't do it. I got all the way down to, let's see. I went and did everything else that I could to complete the Pokedex, so that I caught all the missing things that I was missing in that game. Most of them were exclusives. I almost had everything at this point. I'm down to the point where I only have 12 left. Like, in total, from where I can get down to 12 Pokemon. And spoiler alert, 9 of them are event exclusive, so it's basically 3. And it's like 2 legendaries that I couldn't catch in any of my previous games that were going to be more annoying, and then Arceus itself, which required me to complete the Pokedex. So I went through and I completed the Pokedex in Arceus, went and got all the ones that I would need, and transferred them in and out. Transferred some in to help me finish the Pokedex, transferred them out when I was done after I had evolved them up and things like that. So now we are just a few days ago at this point. The 20th of October, and today is, I'm looking at my phone. I started reaching for it in my pocket. Today's the 24th. So we are 4 days ago riding the bike, and I finally beat that guy, and I do the Giratina, I do that whole thing. Then I have to do the legendaries. And those are annoying. Man, those were annoying. Those legendary ones that were like the Storm, the Landorus, Thundurus, whatever the other ones were, they were really annoying to catch, to be honest with you. They had a whole system mechanic where you have to, I mean, I really liked what Arceus did, but it did make it more difficult. It wasn't just go out and find it. It was go out and find it. And now they've got like, they'll summon whirlwinds that if they hit you too many times, you as a human in the game faint. It's a whole mechanic. If you play through the game, you'll know what I'm talking about. I found that very frustrating, especially the last one. After I got the 3 and I had to get the fourth one, that one took the longest, and that one was the most frustrating. But anyway, I finally got it done. I went through all this. I just had to beat Arceus. Arceus boss fight was a whole thing. Really enjoyed it, but that was really difficult to do. I got all of that done, and the only thing that I had left at this point was the Shield, Pokemon Shield DLC. And at this point, I go, all right, I bought it. I had to spend another $30 on it. I was trying not to spend money, but it's the only way I'm going to complete it. And at this point, I'm so close that yes, it's worth it. So I bought the Shield DLC so I could go through that. And this past Saturday, I went out and did wildlife stuff. Sunday was my day where I was like, okay, I'm going to finish this. I'm going to complete it. Or maybe I actually did that on Saturday after I got back from the wildlife stuff. I don't remember. It's been this weekend. I went through the Shield DLC and I had to do all of that. So that was about a half a day to get through everything. It was 8 hours in all from the point where I got home and I went, okay, I'm done with wildlife stuff. I showered and ate lunch and I got all that stuff done. I was like, all right, here I go. And I started going through the DLC. I did the storyline pretty quickly. That didn't take very long, but then I had to catch all the legendaries. I had to go through this entire... it's a process. It's not easy, but I got everything done. I finished all of that, and I realized I had to go back to Dynamax Adventures in order to get this one stupid... There were two that I really am upset by, because I knew I was doing... when I did the Sword DLC, there were two. There was the little... fluffy Cosmog thing from Pokemon Moon that you could get in Pokemon Moon, but I'd already transferred everything out and it's a one-way transfer. So I had to get it in Sword or Shield and I got it. And then I thought that one, and then this other thing that you get after you've done Dynamax Adventures for a while, you get both of these. A Poipole, I think it is. It's another beast thing. Anyway, I got both of those and I evolved them, because I needed to do that. But I swear, before I evolved them, I transferred them into home and then pulled them back out. And apparently I didn't. So I didn't actually have those, which was really frustrating for me. I knew I'd have to go through Shield anyway, but I did not want to have to make any extra work for myself, and I did with that. So I went through, I had to get those. Cosmog was easy. Once you complete the storyline in the DLC, you just get the Pokemon. You just walk up and you get it. You have to beat all of the DLC. You have to go get all of the legendary Pokemon, which thankfully did not take all that long. And I had to do part of it anyway because you get your choice of certain... It's still, of course, because this has been their MO since the beginning. You have to own both versions of the game or know someone who owns both versions of the game in order to collect all of them. So I did have to make a choice when I was going through Sword about which thing I was going to take at one point. So I knew I had to go back and do that anyway. I didn't know that I was going to have to go get all the legendary birds again. I did not know I would have to complete all these clues to go through a lot more than I was anticipating, which is why it turned the 22nd, so Saturday, into an all-day event of going through everything. But I did, and I got all that done. And then I just had to do Dynamax Adventures. And I started the Saturday out with 2 or 3 hours of Dynamax Adventures and going, I really hate these. I'm losing constantly. The AI is awful. It's such a slog and I don't enjoy it. Thankfully, at least I'm watching something, so I'm not actively focusing on it too much. It's basically just pressing the button over and over, just trying to get through it. And it took a few hours before I finally looked it up and went, how come I haven't seen a single Ultra Beast? Because I know I have to beat 5 of them. Well, you don't do that. That's when I discovered you got to go get all the birds. You got to go do all the legendary stuff. So I go and get all that done. I come back. It's now 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And I start on that stuff and I start going through it. And I finished it up at dinner time. It was a full 8 hours to catch that one last stupid Poipole thing. And then I transferred them out. And the only things that are left are 9 event-exclusive Pokemon that I have no way of getting. I thought at one point maybe I can go back and put in some kind of hacks on the 3DS in order to catch those, to get the event exclusives from back in the day, because they have these ones that you just can't get unless you go in person. Some of them are overseas. You can't even trade them. I got to a point where I thought, okay, maybe I'll just trade for them in Pokemon Home and trade other people legendaries as well and try to just complete the collection that way. It'll take a while because I'll have to find people who are willing to trade for fair things. And if I have a legendary that I could trade, but you can't, the event exclusives cannot be traded. You can only get them from events that you go in person. And there are events going on right now that I can't get access to. Like there's one at GameStop that there's not a GameStop for hundreds of miles, or 100 miles or something, and it's not worth it to drive and go in person to do a thing. I'm not going to do that. I have a chance. I have a lead on one that is available at a Target for the next month leading up to this new Pokemon game. And I have a brother who works at Target that hopefully will be able to get me a code, maybe, if they have an extra code. I'm hoping for that, but at this point, I'm done. I consider myself as close as I can to 905 Pokemon, the total amount that there are. I have 896. Is that math? I think that's math. I don't know. I'm going to put on the screen when I take a screenshot of the total count when it shows how many I have registered in my Pokedex. As I assume, I haven't edited it, obviously I'm still recording, but my plan is to put the things on the screen as I'm going through this. Well, that's it. I appreciate you sitting through this long video. I hope it was interesting. That has been my goal since March of 2021. It was something that came up during the self-help program that I've been talking about that's through my work that's, kind of interesting with setting goals, and we read books and we do things like that. And one of them specifically, it was the reason why I set goals. Could you not bump the hand that's holding the camera, please, cat? Could you not? It doesn't help. Just sit down. We're getting close to food time for her, so she is getting antsy. Anyway, that's been something that I started a long time ago, and it's changed shape, over the year and a half that it took me to get it done. It went from just, here's an excuse to be not bored while I'm riding the exercise bike. And it transformed into one of the biggest undertakings that I've done. And again, not until recently did I realize just how influential Pokemon was to me growing up. It was more than just, a game or a card game or anything like that. It spawned, it gave me this feeling, the completionist attitude. It's what I did in video games. It's what I still do. If I have the option, I will try to complete a video game until it gets either frustrating or I stop having fun. Sometimes long before I stop having fun, or long after I've stopped having fun, before I realize this isn't fun, I need to stop. But I do. I make an honest effort to try to complete a lot of video games. And that in essence of what Pokemon is, of going out into nature and trying to identify things. You have no idea how much I would love a Pokedex level app to identify birds. And I know that there are a few apps that try, but they don't really get close. The technology's not there yet. It's working. It's a machine learning and AI type thing. I don't pretend to understand much of it at all, but I know that it doesn't work very well from my own experiences of what I've tried. It's just very difficult. And also, it still requires you to take a really good, close, clear photo of the bird, which I'm already doing, and then I just look it up in the books anyway. But I never made that correlation. That is part of the journey. It is. It's going out. It's seeing new things. It's completing a collection. It's why I have, and for years now, I've kept a running tally on my own website of all the birds that I've managed to identify and all the pictures that are there, or videos. It all goes back to when I started playing Pokemon and completing that Pokedex and that feeling of like, wow, I did a thing that I don't know anyone else who's done it. Like, even my friend who did it, he didn't complete the Pokedex back in the day that I remember. He might have, but from what I remember doing that, and I didn't know anyone else who had. I was like, well, that's an accomplishment. And it was hard to do back then. It took a long time. It took a lot of work. And so is this. But by the time this rolls out, because I do it at a staggered release, the way that it is, it actually will be. I managed to time it where I was kind of thinking about it like, oh, here's where I'll finish it up and I'll be able to take a break. I am ready for a break from Pokemon, especially after Saturday. 8 hours of just slogging through the grind of trying to get that done. I was fully ready to be done at a long time before that point. Arceus got me frustrated at several points, and going back through the Shield DLC, I'd already done it. It felt boring to kind of do it again, and it was just, if I didn't have if I hadn't made it a goal to complete that stuff before I started a new Pokemon game, I probably wouldn't have stuck with it nearly this long. But I'm glad I did, because I have that feeling of that it's not really a weight, but it is this pressure of like, I got to get it done. I want to be done. I'm ready for new stuff. And I want to break between finishing the old before I start the new, because I don't want to get tired of it. I'm not fully tired of it. If somebody said, hey, do you want to play Pokemon right now? I probably would not want to. There are other games that I'd rather be playing at this point in time, other things that I'd rather be doing. But in a month, I'm ready. I'm ready for new stuff. I'm ready to finally play multiplayer. I'm ready to go through and experience one of the things that my significant other and I like connected with very early on and has continued through this entire relationship is Pokemon. It's kind of a cornerstone to one of the things that we were interested in. I'm ready for new Pokemon. And by the time you're watching this, as I talked about, I finished it here on this weekend, and I do a staggered release for all of Patreon first, of course. All the people who support me in that way. And I know this is completely different from anything that you've ever watched before in that way, but it's been a part of my life for, I mean, really, since I was a single-digit child at some point, and then now leading all the way up to 30-something years old. I still enjoy it. I still play it. I still am playing. I just went through and did something that I didn't expect to do, and as I said, I consider myself done at this point. Maybe I will keep my eye open for the rest of however long it takes. I will try to find events. If it's something that I could do, I really hope that they did it once, like I talked about when I started collecting. They did it once where they just put out a code, and anybody who had the code, it just went on the internet. Everybody got that special exclusive event only Victini or whatever the Pokemon was. I hope that they do that for the rest of them. Or I hope they re-release the other ones, because several of them that I'm missing were events only in Gen 5 that I didn't really play, or some of the later ones. So I didn't have a chance to get those anyway, not to mention the fact that I would have had to travel in person to a place. Some of them are overseas. Some of them have only come out in Japan. What are you going to do about that? That's where I'm hoping they continue this trend of putting the codes online, doing something that's more inclusive for everyone. I hope to do that, but by the time you're watching this will come out, depending on how quickly I can get it edited. It'll be right around the time of a new Pokemon release, and I am really excited for that. I think it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. I try not to look up too much because I don't want things spoiled for me, but I think what I have seen so far, because it's also somewhat unavoidable when other people don't consider, what a new region exclusive looks like, so I've seen some of that stuff, but I have heard that they're taking some of the mechanics from Arceus. So already you take one of my favorite Pokemon games, you take some mechanics from that and you put it into a multiplayer so I can play with other people. Yes, I am all about that, and I'm really excited to play it. So got a couple of weeks where I'll take a break, and then it'll be time for a new one. It'll be new Pokemon, and I'll figure out something else to do while I'm riding on the bike, because obviously I'm not going to stop that. That's good exercise. I'm trying to be healthy and get fitter so I can go out and do the wildlife. I'm still making progress on those goals, and probably will never stop. So I think that's everything in regards to Pokemon. I think that is everything. It has been a long time coming. It's been realistically 20-something years in the process, but more recently it's just been about a year and a half for me to get to where I felt I completed the goal. And as soon as those Battle Network collection comes out, I'll be using that on the bike. I just got a few things in between to get me there. But yeah. Good times. It's been a good experience. It's had ups and downs, but overall I'm glad that I've stuck it through and I got all the way through it and I'm done. And I completed something that most people would not do, quite frankly. Whether it's not worth it to them or whether they're not interested, if they dropped off on Pokemon a long time ago like I did. I'm glad I went back. I'm glad I got that stuff done. I'm glad I completed a goal. I set a goal and I made it all the way through, and I'm hoping that I will just use that as motivation to continue going through goals, completing them, in more of a wildlife sense as well, because there's lots of things, as I was just talking about the other day when I went out and got to see something new for the first time, which that video should have already come out by now. Regardless of if you're a Patreon user or if you're just watching this on YouTube, all of that stuff is staggered, and those videos should come out first. Maybe? Ooh, maybe I don't edit them for... Anyway, I saw something new that I didn't get to see with a new piece of equipment, a new lens that I had. I hopefully will use this as one of the... as something that I was able to complete and get done, and use that as motivation to continue doing such things as completing and getting done goals, setting them for myself, keeping realistic expectations, checking in. Until it's done. Until I have completed what I set out to do. Even if the goal changes. Because like I said, I only started that just trying to complete all the games. And then we got to a point where we decided to complete a Pokedex as much as I could. And now I have close to 900 individual Pokemon. And there's about to be a whole bunch more added to it. And that will be a new challenge. But that I won't be doing as part of a bike ride. And that I'll be doing with people, with my friends, on the weekends. Good times. Do you have anything you would like to add? Don't look away. Don't look away. Look right at it. Don't too close. All right, I'm done.